Hello students, Biology 100 Flex section students. This is Greg Doheny talking. I'll be your instructor for this course. First of all, welcome to the course. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn something. Even if you're just taking this course as an elective and you're not the least bit interested in biology, I hope you find out at least one or two interesting things. The purpose of this video is to explain exactly how the weekly lab works. Now you know at this point you have probably watched the videotape, the brief video explaining how the lecture section of the course works. And so there are actually two separate parts to the course. One is a lecture section or a theoretical section where I lecture you on the principles of biology. And then the second part of the course is the lab section of the course, which is meant to give you some practical experience in how to actually do things in the world of biology, how to do things with regards to biology research, how to do things with regard to human medical procedures, things like that. Now, if this were normal times, we would be doing this practical aspect of human biology in the laboratory at Columbia College. But because we're currently in lockdown, or because you've simply chosen to take the distance education version of the course, we can't do that because we can't go to the college and do these things in a group. However, we can do the next best thing, which is to get you to watch videos of somebody else doing the lab and then ask you questions about it, or give you have you watch a video of somebody else doing the laboratory protocols and then giving you a data set which you have to analyze as if you yourself had gathered the information, as if you yourself had gathered the data. So that's kind of what we're going to do in this lab. It's fairly easy. There are 9 labs plus a lab exam during week 13 of the lab course. The lab section of the course is worth 25% of your grade, and the lecture section or theoretical section is worth 75% of your grade. Now that may seem like the lab is not very important because it's only worth 25% of the grade. However, at Columbia, all of the lab courses we have, for all of the lab courses, we have a rule that says if you don't pass the lab, you can't pass the course. So it doesn't matter how well you do in the lecture section of the course. If you fail the lab section of the course, you fail the entire course. So what that means is that you have to, even though the lab is not worth very much, you have to treat the lab very seriously, because if you fail the lab component of the course, you fail the entire course, regardless of how well you did on the lecture section. So take the course and the lab section seriously. Do the work. It's not particularly hard. You don't have to be terribly sharp. It doesn't take a lot of mental power to complete the labs. It just requires that you do the work. The work is not terribly challenging. Again, it may be a little bit time consuming. In fact, it's somewhat time consuming, but it's not terribly challenging. It's merely a question of your doing it. So if you do the work for the lab, there's no reason why you shouldn't get, 20 out of 25 or 18 out of 25 or something like that. You don't have to be brilliant to get 18 out of 25 for the lab. You just have to do the work. So the work is fairly trivial, but it is important in the sense that if you fail the lab, you'll fail the course. So basically what we're going to do for the lab section of the course is every week I will assign you some background videos that you should review. Those videos are stored on the YouTube channel, on the YouTube website. Some of the videos were created by Columbia College, and some of the videos were created by other institutions. And I'm showing you the videos that were made by other institutions in order to give you references from other sources besides Columbia College. But for each week, for each lab will be on a particular subject. For example, laboratory number 1 is on the use and importance of microscopes. Microscopes obviously are a very important part of a biologist's work. So lab 1 is about using microscopes and about the different types of microscopes. So for lab 1, I would assign you to review and watch a bunch of videos and I will ask you to answer some questions about those videos. I will ask you about information that is contained within those videos. And so what I would do is I would read the questions. You're given the exact questions ahead of time. And then when you've completed watching the videos and you found the answers to all of these questions, then you simply click on a quiz called a pre-lab quiz, and you get asked some questions you get asked the exact questions, and you simply refer to your notes and you enter the correct answers. Okay, so that is called the pre-lab section of the weekly lab. Now, if we were in the lab at Columbia College, you would have been required to read a lab manual which tells you how to do an experiment or an exercise. We require that you have read the lab manual before you come to the lab, because we want you to, there's literally not enough time to read the manual and do the lab within the 2-hour lab period that you have. The only way that you'll have time to complete the lab is if you have read the manual ahead of time and are already familiar with what you're supposed to be doing. So in order to ensure that you've read the lab manual ahead of time, when we do the lab in person at the college, we begin each lab period with a brief quiz. And the quiz, the questions from the quiz are about the lab protocol. So if you have read the lab protocol and you're familiar with it, then you can answer the questions on the quiz. So typically the pre-lab quiz that you do on the videos is worth 1% of your grade. Then you start and you do a quiz regarding the protocols for that week's lab, and you get another % if you get that correct. And then finally, there's a worksheet, some kind of an exercise in the form of a worksheet that you must complete to get a third %. Right? So you get 3 points, 3 percentage points of your grade for each lab. One is for the pre-lab quiz regarding the videos. The other one is the second percentage is for the protocols, to see if you've read and understood the protocols, and the third is is for the worksheet. So there are 9 lab periods, 9 lab exercises, 3% each. Sorry, 2% each. I made a mistake. The pre-lab quiz is worth 0.5%. The worksheet is worth 1. So each lab is actually worth 2%. So 9 labs, 2%, that's 18%. And then we have a lab exam at the end for the remaining percentage to give you a total of 25%. So each week you're supposed to view some videos and answer questions about the videos, and then take a quiz on the videos that you watched, take another quiz on the protocols that you were supposed to have read, and then manipulate some data or some results in a worksheet and answer questions about the worksheet and the work that you've done regarding the worksheet, and that combined gives you 2% of your grade. Okay, so the work is fairly trivial. It's just, for most people, they just find it a little bit time-consuming. All right, so let's go into some of the details of how the lab section of the course works. You probably remember this from the other videotape for the lecture section of the course. My name is Greg Doheny. That's me there. My office hours will again be 3 to 5 p.m. Vancouver time on Mondays. And in order to use the course materials, you will make use of 3 different programs. So the first one is the CAMS program. So when you log into your student portal, when you go to the Columbia College website, you go to www.columbiacollege.ca, and you will find a pull-down menu on the upper right-hand corner of the page that gives you some options for logging in. When you log into what's called the student portal, you have entered the CAMS program, what's known as the CAMS program. The CAMS program is what's known as a classroom management program for teachers, that is used by teachers to deliver educational materials to students. There are a number of different types of course management programs. One of them is called CAMS, another one is called Moodle, which we'll be using again as well. And so when you log into the Columbia College homepage, you log into your student portal, you're in the CAMS program, and that's where your actual grades will be stored. You will also see your grades on the Moodle page, but those are not your official grades, because sometimes for one reason or another I actually have to adjust or alter the grade that you got in the Moodle page in order to turn it into your official mark, which you will see in the CAMS page. So you will be able to see some of your marks on the Moodle page, but do not take those marks seriously, because those are not your official marks. Your official marks for each part of the course and for each exercise that you do can be found on the CAMS page. Okay, now the Moodle page is where you will see most of your teaching and learning materials. And it's also where you will do all of your quizzes, your pre-lab quizzes, your protocol quiz, and your worksheet, and to enter your worksheet material. So that you also know how to get into. You go to the Columbia College website, www.columbiacollege.ca, and instead of logging in where it says Student Portal, you log in where it says Moodle. And this takes you to the page for the lab section of Biology 100. And this has all of the links to the videos, the links to the quizzes, and so on, organized by week. So again, the lab, just like the lecture, the lab is organized into 13 segments because there are 13 weeks. And if you look, you simply scroll down on the page and you'll see what you're supposed to do every week. You simply click on the blue links to be taken to the videos, click on the blue links to be taken to the quizzes, click on the blue links to be taken to the lab exam in week 13. Okay, so that's what the Moodle program is for. And finally, if you want to talk to me in person, this is a flex course which is done what's called asynchronously. You may know that at Columbia College we teach live courses where you go into the classroom or you go into the lab. We also have we also offer what are known as distance education courses that are synchronous distance education courses. For a synchronous distance education course means that we all log on to the computer at the same time, and the professor gives you a lecture in real time, a live lecture, and you can interact with the professor in real time. That's called a synchronous distance course. The word asynchronous means not at the same time. What that means is it's a true distance education course for people that you may be in Vancouver or in the greater Vancouver area. The greater Vancouver area, of course, is Vancouver, Richmond, Burnaby, Surrey, and so on. You may be in the greater Vancouver area, but you could also be overseas. You could be in Asia or South Asia or Africa, where you're in a completely different time zone. And if you're in a completely different time zone, we can't really do a synchronous lecture. So what I do is I pre-record the lectures, just like the one you're listening to now, and you watch the lecture and you take notes, but I'm not lecturing live. It's a pre-recorded lecture. So you may want to ask me some specific questions, and there are two ways to do that. One is that you can ask me a question in what's known as the questions forum, inside which you'll find on the Moodle page. The other way is you can come to my virtual office hours. And so the virtual office hours are where I will be sitting in front of the computer on camera from between 3 and 5 o'clock on Mondays, and you can come and you can ask me a question directly over the internet. And I will be live. You can turn on your camera if you want, and I can talk to you face to face, or you can leave your camera turned off. My camera will be on. But in order to come to those virtual office hours, you have to download a program called Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is a little bit like Zoom, if you're familiar with Zoom. The only difference, or the main difference, is that with Microsoft Teams, you'll download the program, and you'll have a calendar which tells you whether what day of the week it is and when the office hours are. And also, if it's a Microsoft Teams, if you're communicating with me through Microsoft Teams, only students at Columbia College can talk to me. Whereas if we do a Zoom conference, anybody who has the correct code can talk to me, which is what we sometimes try to avoid, because as you know, sometimes we have kind of internet vandals who come in and do what's called Zoom bombing. They come in and they make a fuss and try to disrupt the classroom. That can happen with Zoom. It can't happen with Teams, and so that's why we generally use, for office hours, we use Teams. So if you look at the web page, the Moodle web page for the lecture section of the course, you'll see how you can download Teams and use it. So if you want to talk to me, if you want to come to my office hours, you can come by virtually over the internet between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock on Mondays using the Microsoft Teams program. So we have 3 different computer programs that you will be using: CAMS, Moodle, and Microsoft Teams. The CAMS program is basically just to look at your grades. It's where your grades are. The Moodle program is where all of the educational materials are. And Microsoft Teams is the way you would communicate with me directly during my office hours. Okay, so what you do is you go to the Columbia College website. You go www.columbiacollege.ca. You look on the upper right-hand side of the page and you find a login menu. You pull that menu down and you see that you can log in with a student portal. That will take you to your CAMS page where your grades are, or you can log into the Moodle program, and that will take you to the Moodle web page for the lab section of the course, as well as the lecture section as well. So if we log in through the Moodle page, you will see something that looks like this. This is the home page view for your courses that are being delivered to you through the Moodle program. And you notice that right in the middle here we have Biology 100 Flex, and then there's the semester. This is I'm making this video during the 2022 winter semester, but you might be taking the course at another time. So you'll see something like that for the lab. You'll also see this for the lecture. Right? So if you want to do the lecture materials, you click on this. If you want to do the lab materials for the week, the weekly lab materials, you would click on this. So if you click on this, you'll see something that looks like this. So this is the Biology 100 Flex Laboratory homepage. And here's a little illustration, a lithograph of an early microscope that uses light. So that's the logo for my particular lab section of the Flex Lab. And then you go from there and you scroll downwards on the page and just start reading about, and the written words on the page will tell you how the course works and what you're supposed to do every week. Right, so for example, you scroll down to week 3 and you'll see that there's a brief introduction to what we're doing that week. It's a lab that's designed to introduce you to how to use the microscope and become familiar with different types of microscopes and how they're used and what they're used for. And then you'll see a little list that says what to do this week. And what it said, there are basically 3 things that you have to do every week. Number 1 is you watch some background videos, and then you take a quiz on the background videos to make sure you've watched them. Then you read some protocols, and then you take a quiz on the protocols to make sure you read them. And then you complete a worksheet. You do some work on a worksheet, and then you enter the answers to the worksheet basically in a quiz format. And that's what you do for the week. And then you get your 2 points for that lab, ideally. And if you have any questions, you can leave me written questions in the questions forum, or you can talk to me during the office hours on Monday. One of the disadvantages to the questions forum is that if you enter a question there, you enter the question in writing, I won't be the only one who can read your question. All of the other students in the course can read your question. Now that's a disadvantage if you don't want other people to see what you're asking, but it's an advantage because all the other students, probably a lot of the other students, have the same question. And so therefore you would have been doing them all a favor by asking me the question so they don't have to. So you ask the question, they don't have to. They're all relieved that they didn't have to step forward and be conspicuous and ask a question because you asked it. And then I will answer the question in this public forum and everybody can read the answer. So it is kind of nice to enter and ask questions in the questions forum because I'm sure that other students have the same question, and so I'll answer it once and everybody can read it. And everybody will be grateful to you for having asked the question that they probably might have been too embarrassed to ask, for instance. So the questions forum is very good. All right, so what to do for each week's lab? You simply you get onto the Moodle page, you scroll downwards, you do pre-lab videos a lab protocol, and then a worksheet. You take and then you take all of these quizzes. Now the work can be done anytime during the week. Right? The work, you can watch the background videos and read the protocol manual and do the worksheet. You can do all of that anytime during the week, but you have to enter the materials and write the quizzes sometime on Wednesday. Now, because this is a flex schedule, it's for people who are all over the world who are doing these exercises at different time zones. You're allowed to take the quizzes, the pre-background video quiz, the protocol quiz, and enter the worksheet answers. You can do that anytime during a 24-hour period on Wednesday. Once you've started the quiz, however, let's say you're doing the pre-lab video on the microscopes, once you start the quiz, you only have a finite fixed amount of time to complete it. And when you go to the quiz page, before you open the quiz, it will tell you how much time you have to complete all the questions. So you can start these quizzes anytime on Wednesday during the 24-hour period, but that doesn't mean you have the whole day to complete these exercises. Once you start the quiz, you might have 20 minutes to finish the background video quiz, and then you move on and you start the protocol quiz. You might have an hour to finish the protocol quiz, and then you enter the answers in the worksheet quiz, and you might have an hour to enter those answers, but you're not given a 24-hour period to answer the quizzes. You're given a 24-hour period to complete them. You can start them anytime, but once you start them, the clock, a countdown clock, will start to run, and you have to complete them. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, there are two components to Biology 100. There's a lecture component that's worth 75% of your grade. You might have a different instructor for the lecture section and the lab section. If you find that that's the case, please email me and tell me, because I might have missed that. I might have assumed incorrectly that all the students that I have in my lecture section of the course are the same students that I have registered in my lab section of the course. But occasionally the college will by necessity have to put a student in one instructor's lab and another instructor's lecture section. So if I'm not registered as your lecturer as well as your lab instructor, please email me and let me know, and then I'll just make a note of that so that I don't I don't do something foolish with your grades, put them in the wrong place or something. All right, so there is a lecture component. Hopefully I'm your lecture instructor as well, but if I'm not, please email me. And there's also a lab component, which we're just discussing now, which is worth 25% of your grade. You must pass them both. As I said already, you have to pass them both. The lab is worth 25%. That means in total you have to get a minimum of 12.5% in order to pass the entire course. Because in order to pass the entire course, you have to get 50% of all the material, but you have to get half of the lab material by itself. So you need to get at least 12.5% out of the 25% available for the lab. Okay, it's a flex schedule course, which means that this is for students who are living in all over the world in different time zones, which is the reason why I give you a 24-hour period to complete the quizzes on Wednesday. But bear in mind that once you start the quizzes, the clock is running and you have a finite fixed amount of time to complete them. Nevertheless, all of this work has to be submitted anytime on Wednesday. So what to do each week? The lab work basically is you watch some background videos, you read a lab protocol, and you do exercises on a worksheet, and then you take a quiz on each of these three things. Right? So again, flex schedule. You can submit questions to the questions forum, but that is entirely voluntary. Nobody is required to ask me any questions. You can attend the office hours, but again, that is voluntary. You are not required to talk to me. The office hours are entirely for your benefit. If you think that you would benefit by talking to me directly, then please come by the office hours and I'll talk to you. If you think you understand the material pretty well without talking to me, that's fine. I generally I teach the remote Biology 100 course every semester, and probably only 50% of the students have ever talked to me, because the other 50% think that they don't need don't need to talk to me directly in order to complete the material. And that's perfectly all right. It doesn't affect your grade. You know, talking to me or not will not affect the way I think about you when I award your grade. You know, like when I was a student, you know, I was a student for a very long time. When I started out as a student, I thought, well, my professor might give me a better grade if I make a fuss, make it look like I'm really interested in this material when I'm not. I was completely wrong about that. You know, the professor basically mainly judges your performance by how well you do on the quizzes. If you're interested in the material, that's great. If you're legitimately interested in the material and you're enthusiastic about it, then yes, by all means, talk to me about it. But if you're not really terribly enthusiastic about the material, you don't have to talk to me about it. I would love to talk to anybody who's enthusiastic about it. I would love to talk to anybody who's very interested in biology, because so am I, and I can give you valuable advice, and I can, you know, advice what to do and what not to do, advice about what's interesting and what's not interesting, and what's lucrative and what's not lucrative. I can do all of that sort of thing, but it's not required. It's totally for your benefit. So you go to this page, you scroll downwards. For each week, you get a list of things to do, which includes a set of background videos with predetermined questions, a lab protocol, basically a section from the lab manual, and then a worksheet which you have to complete. You have the entire week to do all of that. You have to enter the material, do the quizzes and so on sometime on Wednesday, and the clock is running once you start those quizzes. The blue links, the blue texts, are actually what are known as hot links. Hot links meaning that if you click on them, it will take you to the quiz, or it will take you to the test. Right, so we have each week in detail. What we do is we watch background videos, and I give you some questions in advance to look for the answers while you're watching those background videos. And then you take a quiz on the background videos, but you have the answers in front of you because you looked them up, and that's the idea. Then you read the lab manual, lab protocol. Protocols is, you know, procedures, what you're going to do for this particular experiment. And then you read the protocols, and then I will have supplied you with a demonstration video. So if we were doing this lab at the college in the laboratory in person, you would do the experiment. Because this is a distance education course, you can't do the experiment directly, so what we do, the next best thing, which is really not the next, it's really not as good as doing it yourself, but it's all we can do under the circumstances. The next best thing is we have one of our instructors named Sarah Gomeshi-Nobari do the experiment, and then you watch her do the experiment, and then you answer questions about her doing the experiment and questions about what you read in the lab protocols. Right? And then you take a quiz on the lab protocols, and then you do some exercises on a worksheet, and then you enter your answers basically into a quiz format. But you have the answers in front of you. All right, so every week you watch your videos and answer the questions, read the protocols, complete the worksheet, and then when you're confident about all this, you take the background video quiz, you take the protocol quiz, and then you enter your answers to the worksheet in a third quiz on the lab exercise. So, for example, this is a typical, if you had clicked on that blue link, it would have taken you to a page that lists the YouTube addresses of 6 different videos on the compound microscope. So this is in fact what you're going to be doing during week 3 of the lab. So if you then click on one of those, or if you simply copy and paste the address into the window, into your web browser window, and then hit return, click return, it will take you to the video on YouTube. And I will have given you some questions to answer about that video in advance. So here are some of the answer the following questions about these videos, and then so we have part 1, part 2 of the video. And so, for example, in the question it says from part 2, be prepared to name all of the parts of a microscope. So as you're watching that video, you'll be writing down the names of all the parts of the microscope, because you know that I'm going to ask you about that on the pre-lab video quiz. I've told you so. Okay, so also I will have asked you what's the standard range for interpupillary distances. Okay, so that means that somewhere in that video they're going to tell you what the standard range for interpupillary distances is. Now when you're using a microscope, you may notice that it has 2 different eye lenses, 2 different eyepieces that are called ocular lenses. And the interpupillary distance, it's the same for eyeglasses. The interpupillary distance is literally the distance between your 2 pupils. So when an optometrist makes a pair of eyeglasses for you, they have to build them so that taking into account your interpupillary distance. And when you're working with a microscope, you again have to take into account your interpupillary distance. And on a microscope, it can be adjusted. Okay, now in that video, they will actually tell you what the standard range for interpupillary distances is. It's about 65 millimeters. I've forgotten what the exact number is, but it is actually listed in, and so it's listed in the video. And when you're actually using a microscope, you can adjust the 2 ocular lenses to match your own personal interpupillary distance. Okay, so these are typical questions that you will see when you click on the pre-lab video section for each lab. Then you watch the video. It's on YouTube. Notice that when you watch a video on YouTube, you have the option of turning on the transcript. So if you click on these 3 little dots, one of the options that you'll be given is to turn the transcript on. So the transcript is you could even try it with this video, it'll work. The transcript is a written translation of what I'm saying. So if I'm talking too fast or too quickly, or you're having trouble understanding my accent or something like that, you have the option of reading as we go along instead of just listening. Right? So that's a feature that's available to you when these videos are stored on YouTube, which is one of the reasons why we store them on YouTube, so that you have the option of turning on the transcript and reading if you're having trouble understanding my spoken words, or if you're having trouble understanding the words of any of these videos. All right, so the protocols. So this is a page from the protocol sheet, so you will have read these protocols. Typical protocols for each lab are about 10 pages of writing. It's tedious reading, but it's necessary. So you read the protocols and then you answer questions about that. For the protocol quiz, you are not given the questions in advance, so you have to more or less have you can have the protocol in front of you, but it helps if you've read it beforehand to know where to look for the answers. And as I said, I will give you a video to watch. So here we have Sarah Gomeshi Nobari, who's one of the biology lab instructors at Columbia. She's also happens to be the Dean of Science. She's my boss, but she's also an instructor as well. So she will show how to use the microscope and show how to do all the exercises. So you watch her doing the experiment as opposed to doing it yourself, which is what you would do if we were holding this lab in the actual college. Okay, so then we give you a set of data, you manipulate the data, maybe you do some calculations, and then you give us back the answers in the lab worksheet quiz. Okay, now when you open up a quiz, you click on the blue text and it will take you to the quiz. And so when it takes you to the quiz has not actually started yet until you push the button that says Begin Quiz. This one actually says Preview Quiz, but that's a mistake. It should say Begin Quiz. Okay, so it's telling you here that you're allowed only 1 attempt to do this. Once you've started it, you have a certain amount of time to do it, 20 minutes in this case. Right? And it says that the quiz will not be available until, in this case, it says Friday, September 11th, and at midnight, basically Vancouver time. And then it says the quiz will close September 11th at midnight again, basically, or it will close at 12. I'm sorry, this is a more restricted time window in this case. What you will see when you click on most of your quizzes is that the quiz is open at midnight and will close at 11:59 the following morning, a 24-hour period. But so you have a 24-hour period to do the quiz, but once you've started, you probably have something like 20 minutes to complete it. Okay, if you go into the quiz, you'll find that a lot of the questions are multiple choice. Some of the questions are short answer questions. So some of the questions, typically, most of these quizzes are most of the questions are multiple choice, and some of them you have to fill in a short answer where the question can be answered with 1 or 2 words or with some numbers. There is one part of the one lab where we have to draw a graph, so you will have to get some graph paper, or if you know how to use Microsoft Excel, which is a graphing program, you're free to use that as well. But if you don't know how to use any computer graphing programs, you'll need to get some graph paper and simply draw a graph. All right, so that's what you will see each week. You'll see a written section to tell you in detail what you have to do each week. All right, so how much are the labs worth? Well, the background quiz, I made a mistake about this earlier, but the background video quiz is worth 0.5%, the lab protocol quiz is worth 0.5%, and the worksheet answer is worth 1%. So 2% per lab. There are 9 labs. For all the lab exercises combined, you get 18%, and then the lab exam is worth 7%. And combined, they are 25% of your grade. Okay, so once more, you have to pass the lab section in order to pass the course. Finally, we said that this is a flex course, which means that it is a flexible schedule. So that's the reason for allowing you any time in a 24-hour period to submit the information for the labs. The one exception to this rule is for the lab exam, which will be held on the last Wednesday of the semester. It will be held on Wednesday of week 13. I'll give you the exact date once the course gets going, but it will be held on Wednesday of week 13 from 1800 to 2000, that's 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. Vancouver time. Right now, because of the fact that some of you are in different time zones, you have the option of writing the lab exam between 6 and 8 p.m. Vancouver time. If you're in a different time zone, you have the option of writing it between midnight and 2 a.m. Vancouver time. So for instance, that would be 12 noon in Central Asia, or South Asia rather. So there are 2 options depending on which time zone you're in. Tell me which of those 2 options you want for writing the lab exam, the early one or the regular one. The early one is from midnight to 2 a.m. Vancouver time. The regular one is from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Vancouver time. They are 2 different exams. They're not the same exam, but they are different but equivalent. Right, so they're different questions but equivalent difficulty. So there's no advantage or disadvantage to taking one versus the other. The only reason why you would want to take one versus the other is depending on what time zone you're in. So that is how the lab works. I urge you to go to the lab Moodle page and start reading it as soon as possible and get a head start on it. As I said, you don't have any lab activities during the first week of class. During the second week of class, you have kind of a practice lab, which is not very difficult to do. And so during those first 2 weeks, I would advise you to start reading the material and start working on the lab material ahead of time, because if you've been a student before, you know this. If you haven't been a student before, I'll give you some advice. Typically, university courses start slow, and it seems like you don't have a lot to do during the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then it's like a snowball rolling downhill. The more it rolls downhill, the bigger it gets. As the course goes on, you will learn more and more and more and more material that you're expected to learn and memorize, and it suddenly becomes overwhelming. So towards the end of the course, everybody feels overwhelmed because the amount of material that they have to learn and work on and do has snowballed. You roll a snowball down the hill, it accumulates more snow, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the course material will get more and more difficult as the course goes on. So therefore, I advise you to get an early start during the first 2 weeks when we have kind of light lab duties. All right, so please go to the Moodle page and start reading. Please go to the Moodle page for the lecture and start reading and watching lectures there as well. And good luck in the course, and I hope to hear from you at some point. Okay, good luck.